Hi everyone, I'm Emily, as you just heard, and I'm joined today by a really good panel of guests to talk about gaming and whether or not we really want gamers to own their assets, which I think is fun, right? We're flipping the conversation. But I'll get everybody to introduce themselves first. So starting with you, Webb.
Hi, my name's Thomas Webb. I'm the CEO and founder of Worldwide Web, a fully interoperable metaverse game on Ethereum. And we've just closed a 10 million round yesterday, so we're pretty gassed up to build the, thank you.
Yeah, big work.
We're going to build the next generation of Web3 games.
You saw that?
My name's Tyler Drewitz. I'm director of AtariX. And we created AtariX to really build a community around what we were doing in Web3 with Atari and building new experiences, combining different meta experiences and gamifying everything using our 50-year-old brand so we can do some pretty cool things with some cool people.
Hi, my name is Anna Berbic. I'm the digital marketing director at Illuvium, and I'm super happy to be here today. Nice to meet y'all. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Aleksander, one of the co-founders of Sky Mavis and Axie Infinity. Yeah, I might leave it there because hopefully people know what we have done so far.
Yeah, I think this room in particular should know what Axie Infinity is. So I'm going to start with Anna because I think you probably have the broadest view of this topic. But what do you think that the Web3 gaming landscape looks like at the minute? Because you've kind of done a whole bunch of roles also before Illuvium. So.
Well, to sort of answer that question from a personal perspective, I do come from Web2 Gaming. I've gone into Web3 Gaming about a year and a half ago. And now, as I said, I'm in digital marketing for Illuvium. For me, I think we have a really big challenge in front of us because there is not that many really good quality projects that are being built, and it's very important that those that are amazing and have product first, blockchain second, as bad as that might sound here, they need to be able to stand out with their marketing, with their PR, with their community. If they are DAOs, they need to be able to stand out with their governance, with the decisions they're making, with how much they're listening to what the community wants to do. And in my opinion, we are doing it really well with Illuvium. We are a DAO. We do try to listen to our community. We have a governance council. We go back and forth on every single decision. We have built 3 incredible games. We have an auto battler game. We also have an open world explorer. We also have a strategy game. And right now we're launching a really big NFT collection called Illuvium Beyond, which is going to be more than any NFT collection is because it's also like a collectible, customizable experience where you have a game beyond it, where you can, we're really trying to push it a step further to show that Web3 games can be as good quality as Web2 games. That said, obviously, it's a very big challenge to make sure that the product meets the standard, that the community enjoys playing the product, that we give enough members of the community access to play and to give us feedback, but not to overwhelm the developers by going into something public too fast. That's my opinion on it, and this is from Illuvium's perspective, obviously. Regarding the smaller projects, I think the industry is really big. There's a lot of funds in the industry that are available. If you want to build something and you are product first and you are focused on delivering a good game, gamers first, amazing experience to play, to have fun, to enjoy, to build, you can do that with the availability we have right now in Web3.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you bring up with ownership is that governance side of it and not wanting to overwhelm your team. Alex, as someone who's creating Axie Infinity, you have a very, very large community to deal with. How do you find balancing that issue between ownership of just NFTs to play the game and also governance of the system?
Yeah, so I guess for context, now it's been 5 years or so since we started with Axie. We've gone through several cycles of development, of learning more about what the community wants and how we as a core developer can push it forward. I think some of the key learnings is that the community oftentimes has a lot of feelings and they want to participate and they want to be seen and helped. But from a developer perspective, when you are starting out, right, there is so much stuff that you can't share. So there's asymmetrical information, right, at play. And it's our job as developers to see how much can we share and how can we actually harness the community's power, right, in the best possible way. So we are starting to do that more and more and more with Axie. I think it's quite difficult actually to see where the topmost value can be found. You need to really, I guess from a marketing perspective, of course it's obvious, but you can also involve them in game design decisions. But at that time it becomes very difficult because everyone has incentives, right? So you have to design for the incentives because people try to be very selfish or are oftentimes very selfish. And it's our job to kind of have that in mind when we are designing our games. So in short, quite difficult problem to solve, but you really need to try to harness it, and we're getting there, I would say.
And coming from a traditional gaming studio perspective as well, Tyler at Atari, so how do you balance that? I mean, the idea of letting people use ownership in Atari as governance is probably quite different for you being a publicly traded company, and how are you kind of approaching the idea of digital assets for Atari?
Yeah, and it's an interesting topic for us. Mainly for a few reasons. One is we are a brand, a 50-year-old brand. People have preconceived notions. They have the Atari they think we should be, the Atari they want us to be, or just they still exist, Atari. For us, we're coming in from a brand perspective into this Web3 space where the ownership may not be on an asset basis. It may be a key, it may be unlocking features, it may be on, and when I say features, I mean actual games. Our core is arcade games, fun, going back to Pong, Missile Command, Asteroid, Centipede, Black Widow. And we're coming out with 11 new titles in the next calendar year. And so all part of that is unlocking these features, adding additional benefits. So it's not as much as in-game assets and that ownership and that governance as far as that's concerned. It's really bringing into our ecosystem and then us going out and we are a brand that's easy to gamify, easy to make sense of what this Web3 landscape is at the moment with all these different metaverses and experiences, whether it be digital or physical, and we can kind of tap and lend our simple games to make it easier to understand in various places, and then we'll bring them back into our ecosystem and reward anyone who interacts with the Atari name. So we kind of look at it from a different approach, but overall, it's rewarding a community, growing that community in fun activities, actually creating something that's fun to play. And game development takes a while. So the next year, we're going to start to see a lot of really awesome games come to the market, and it's going to start to feel different within the Web3 gaming space, and it might even feel a little bit Web 2.5, but still be Web3.
Yeah, I mean, if you're 50 years old, it's going to feel a bit Web 2.5 at the beginning, right? And kind of in the vein of how ownership means something different to everybody on this panel, I think you at World Wide Web, it's obviously you're more about letting people bring ownership from somewhere else to you, right? If you want to explain a bit about that and the game that you're doing as well. Yeah,
so when we built World Wide Web, the thing we saw that was so amazing about NFTs is that we now have access to this ledger that essentially tells us every single game asset every player has. And to me, all that said was that if you come into my game, if my game is a social game, it's like an MMO or a game where people should be able to meet new players, interact, play with their friends, they should be able to play as themselves. And I think gamers identify as their characters in the games they love playing. You look at Fortnite, like Fortnite's model has been so successful bringing IP into these games so people could play as their favorite characters. So with NFTs, what we did at World Wide Web, and we started this kind of revolution, was that for every NFT token you held, we would convert that into a pixel art character and put it in our game. So we integrated brands like Doodles, Deadfellas, Yuga's assets, CryptoPunks, and so on. And we now have over 1.2 million avatars from across all of the biggest NFT collections in our game, which essentially means that anyone can come in and can log in and immediately play as their PFP, which I think is extremely valuable in social gaming. And so for us, gaming is less about trying to create a game where we're selling assets in the game, but more about creating economy between players. Allow them to be themselves, allow them to create games and interact in our game economy, but mainly just to enjoy having fun with one another in an online experience. So I see the NFT gaming and gaming with NFTs about being, not only is it a great way for us now to have this great concept of like free to own in a way where players can play to earn items based on how skillful they are in the game, and then they can sell those if they have value. That value is obviously attributed from how much the player base values those items, which is interesting when you think about it from like an interoperable universe where it could be valued through multiple communities throughout multiple NFT projects. So I'm really excited to see what happens as more NFT collections integrate into other games, platforms, and we think more about interoperability, because I can literally go to any one of these projects now and I can see all of these players, exactly what game assets they're holding, and I can edit, I can take that data and transform it to an experience in my game. And I think that's the real beauty of NFT, blockchain, Web3 gaming. Buzzword alert.
Yeah, and you bring up an important point as well. With ownership also, at the minute comes speculation, it comes the financial element of video games in Web3. That's not something that every gamer in the world has been that on board with so far, right? It's been a pretty split year, particularly in the last year when NFT volumes have been down. I mean, Anna, how do you think that gamers are really approaching it now? And actually yourself as well as game developers, how are you tackling that perception of NFT in games at the minute?
It's a lot of questions in one question. But all right, so someone who does come from Web2 gaming, there are so many ways that you can monetize a product. First of all, you can sell the base game, you can sell DLCs, you can sell original soundtrack, you can sell an art book. It has a fixed way to monetize a product. You know, you can already make a revenue, let's say, revenue plan for the next 3 years. For marketing, you know exactly how much you need to market out, what needs to go to paid marketing, how many users you need to bring to achieve your targets. That's so different in Web3 gaming because there is obviously free-to-play games, and you are going to have games where you need to own a specific asset to be able to play. Illuvium has the free-to-play aspect, and it also has the aspect where you can own an asset and generate, for instance, fuel or generate some sort of resource that will help you within one of our games. We have coined something which is the interoperable blockchain gaming, and we have all of our games which are interconnected, which means that if you play one game, if you, for instance, own land and you're playing Illuvium 0 with land, you can farm resources, you can use those resources and fuel in Illuvium overworld, you can use that fuel to catch illuvials, you can use your illuvials to go play arena. And that's the beauty of having an NFT, because you can bring it from one game to another, but that also means that we have to have a way to monetize on it. So we do have an aspect where while you're, let's say, jumping or moving from one game to another, you do have to pay a certain fee. You can choose to play the free-to-play aspect if you are only using the tier 0 illuvials, which are characters in-game, or you can choose to also obviously pay and play with higher value characters. Them being NFTs, regardless of what you play with, you can still grow your character. And I go back to the whole point of this panel is we want our users to own assets. We want our users to feel like they have a say in the game. And we definitely want our users to feel like, let's say like this, if they worked really hard, if they've been playing the game for a really long time, if one day they decide they no longer want to be a part of it, their NFT is easily transferable on the marketplace, or they can decide to put it aside and come back to it another time. So this is what I think is beautiful about Web3, is we will find ways to monetize. It's just so new, and we're just now building incredible blockchain games, and it's going to take time to figure out what are the Web2 strategies of the Web3 gaming to be continued.
Yeah, but I guess but part of the question is also, is that something that's like encouraged among gamers? It's definitely been a bit of a split opinion among traditional gamers as to whether or not monetizing the way they play is something that they want.
Well, you're going to have to ask all the gamers in the room.
It's interesting you bring this up, though, because a lot of games, we do it in gaming with MMOs, look at RuneScape or WoW, they have these gold sinks, right? They take money from the player to do certain actions. And what's interesting now is we've got this problem we're trying to solve, which is, what if we move all of our digital items onto the blockchain and all of the coins onto the blockchain? Now they have this freedom to be traded. How are we going to collect any kind of revenue from that? You look at most games now on the app stores, they're all free to play. How do you have a free to play game where you need to give people stuff that doesn't hyperinflate forever? And what we're seeing now at the moment with, say, the Blur marketplace and what that's done to creator royalties, the conversation was just happening on this stage with the CEO of Doodles, is we're seeing this complete business model that is perfect for Web3 games, right? Like, everything's free, you earn it, and you can take a tax. We're seeing that fall away, and we're having to move back to these traditional models, which I think is going to be very tricky if the goal for Web3 gaming is to put all of the items and assets on-chain.
And just to add to that a little bit is, Web2 gamers have a little bit of a hangover from microtransactions. That model of free-to-play, microtransactions, we're going to charge you, is hard. So they see a new asset come in, they see new NFTs as that next microtransaction. When what I think is it's about the small wins now. So showing them and showing gamers, both Web 2, Web 3, these small wins, whether it's single sign-on and owning assets for just normal things you would do within a game anyway, playing the game, where they can own it, or they could just leave it and never touch it like they would in a Web 2 game. So it's just continuously getting these small wins, where us as creators, it's our obligation to create these small wins, and then more people will start to realize the value that will ultimately come from being on blockchain. As we start to see more and more games go that way, and more development studios, including some of the larger guys, go that way as well.
And Alex, at Axie Infinity, you kind of had that narrative shift yourself over the last year, right? You moved from play to earn to play and earn as you moved into the new game. What are the kind of things that you've learned in 2022 that you're now applying to what you want to do this year?
So, I mean, yeah, we pioneered this, you can earn a token and then eventually people speculate on it and the economies kind of go haywire. There's a lot of challenges with it. But what's cool about it is that you're kind of tapping into what makes Web3 unique, right? So you are leaning into some of the benefits that make it special, right? So the ownership economy, the fact that people can actually earn something, that it's more special, more, you get a higher emotional connection to these assets, I think, than in Web 2. And I think what we've seen now is that the pendulum has swung to the other side, where basically play to earn is now this is super, super bad thing. And nobody's like, oh, you have to make super sustainable economies and everything needs to be great in that sense. And it's incredibly hard to make that. And when we now, for example, with the new Axie Origins game, we are going to market, let's say, on the app stores, the directive that we are getting from them is, oh, you need to do X, Y, Z. You need to put in the game into this little box. And inside that box is literally nothing of the benefits that we want people to, to see of Web3. So we end up having to compete with Web 2 games without showing the Web3 benefits, which is freaking ridiculous. So a part of what we are trying to do now is actually enacting change when it comes to the policies of Web 2, like app stores, like Google Play, like the iOS Apple Store. But that's quite challenging because they have their own, as I said, the box, because they want their own fees, etc. So what I feel like is, it's time to really, even be more aggressive. We need more tokens. We need more crazy stuff in terms of experiments. And I'm excited to do that with Axie so that people can actually truly see some of the unique benefits that are enabled here.
Is that something that the rest of the panel would agree with? We need to be doing more experimentation with Web3 mechanics?
I think Alex makes an amazing point there about app stores. Like, at the moment, app stores, you cannot create a game on the App Store that allows access to anything in the game based on a token, meaning an NFT. So you can't create an NFT game inside the App Store, which means that entire user base, those billions of users, those people with mobile phones like yourselves, we don't have the ability to access them. That's why for World Wide Web, for example, we're a browser-based game. We have to build our entire game inside a browser, which is extremely limiting. But as Alex is saying, it gives you a lot of potential to do some really cool things in Web 3. So I think you're right. We need to do some really crazy stuff and say, hey, app stores, we actually don't need you, so you need to change the terms and conditions and allow us to be able to do what we want to do. Otherwise, we'll just do it ourselves.
But
actually, yeah, one follow-up comment there. Axie Infinity was never on any app store. We onboarded 2.7 million daily active players by forcing them to go to axieinfinity.com, downloading an APK, or downloading it directly to their PC. This is possible, but the benefits needs to be strong enough, or the alternative is neutering down the game to the level that is acceptable within the app stores, and then you're competing against everyone else who's got the 20 years of hyper-optimization to do monetization for free-to-play games. It's totally ridiculous to try to do that. Be more aggressive. That's my advice to anyone who's building Web 3 type of games.
Yeah, but the interesting point I think that gets brought up then is the reason why the app stores have made those decisions to stop allowing NFTs is because of the negative consequences that have also happened for some players. Would that approach of just experimenting more and being more aggressive not then result in potentially even more punitive measures? I'm not sure what they could do more, but I mean, Tyler, what do you think of that?
Yeah, so coming in it from even a brand lens, and I see a lot of brands come into this space, and I think they're doing it wrong, for lack of a better word, honestly. As a brand coming into this space, and we're a brand that has games and has gaming experiences, both Web 2, Web 3, in various places, digital, physical, hardware, and in Web 2, it was direct to consumer. It was easy. We could throw products up. You throw them, put them on all the consoles for games, if they're digital, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, Steam, Epic, and then you sell them. And there's feedback. It's a rating score. You move on. Web 3, to me, is direct to community. And that model is completely different. It's a two-way street now. One way was very much one-way street, where you're just giving them a product. Obviously, there's feedback, ratings, everything like that. In Web 3, you're actively building with the community. You're building for the community. It's our job as a brand to provide a game or an experience or something that's fun, something that they'll enjoy, something that they want to interact with, which is completely different than that Web 2 direct-to-consumer, because that was about generating that revenue and that income right away. And then you move on to the next. So it's as we start to grow and develop these experiences, that is going to follow, at least in my opinion. So I think that piece is very important, is building that community, which now means going on Discord and having these conversations and some of these tough conversations with people. I still have yet to find a community manager that is 100% okay with mental health. And that's a whole other issue in our space that we should be looking at as well. And what is those faucets and sinks that we can at least have that conversation and grow together in a good way? And I think, working with the community and building that community is a major part of that.
Mm. And just to kind of wrap it up, as I know we're kind of getting close to time and I want everybody to be able to answer the conversation, the buzzword on any gaming panel is always interoperability. And Anna, you mentioned it earlier in terms of how you're able to achieve that between Illuvium games. What do you think are the next steps that you'd have to take to make that interoperable elsewhere? That's always the question. There are blockchain alliances already between other Web3 games, but obviously for world domination, you have to go bigger than that, right?
Well, in just speaking from like Illuvium perspective, and I'm sure that every speaker here will have a very different perspective on what needs to happen. But for us, we are, as I said, we've built 3 games that are currently fully interoperable, which means you'll be able to take assets and bring them between the games. Obviously, none of those games are still fully public because we are in private betas. We are in those stages where we're testing what works, what can work. And for games that we're building, they are AAA games. They are really, really hard to build, really, really big projects. They request a lot of manpower. We have around 200 people that are working on these games. And we are currently sort of exploring what is the next step while we're in the private beta phases and while the users are giving us feedback on the games themselves. So I think that's probably a better question for somebody who's already been in a public public game, that has a game that's been playable by millions.
Well, then that would be you, Alex, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so even early stages, let's say 2019, 2020, we spent a lot of time thinking about how could we be interoperable with other projects. And at the time, there weren't really that many other games. So we actually made partnerships with Aave and MakerDAO and Kyber Network, some very early DeFi protocols. And what we figured out pretty fast is that when we're spending so much development time like building some interoperable like experiment, maybe we can onboard like 200 people. And of course, that's great. They are some whales, but it doesn't really lead us to where we want to be, right? So we want to onboard millions, hundreds of millions of people into the space. That means that we can't target you guys here in this room. That means that even if we end up making interoperable experiences for your Bored Ape or your Pudgy Penguin or Seal or all the other NFT projects, maybe we can get you to play our game, but at the end of the day, that probably isn't what's going to make the pie bigger. So this is like a very serious business decision where like, okay, fine, maybe we can't be interoperable with everyone in the NFT space right now. Our strategy goes into another direction. And there are other people in the space who are focusing purely on catering for the NFT crowd right now. I think that's a viable business model for sure, to build your first 1,000 true fans. But what happens after that? So we're, I would say, at a different level. And similarly to Illuvium, what we have is in Axie, what we like to say a virtual universe, where you have your main Axie cute characters that you then can go on in different adventures, different games that we make, such as Axie Origins, such as Homeland. And then we have a builders program, so we let other people make their own games. And we partner with other game studios. And the idea is that everything you do across these games, they combine into this one group of characters that then again, you travel with and are build upon, so you have your digital identity evolve over time. So that's what we also think about interoperability. I think it's much healthier for game studios to do that, because you can control your journey yourself, right? Rather than like catering for a smaller market, which might not be exactly what you want at such an early stage. So depends a little bit.
And what do you think as well? Do you think that gamers are wanting to take the avatars and the skills that they earn in World Wide Web elsewhere and play with it in other games that aren't in your control in development? Because that's the ideal, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different types of games, and so it's hard to categorize them all under kind of one ethos. But for us, we believe in social games, social experiences, bringing people together. And in that instance, what I think is so fascinating about the conversation around interoperability, for example, like let's use Reddit as an example. Like they're moving their Reddit upvotes on chain. So that means when you log into my game, I can see how many upvotes you've had in a particular subreddit. I can use that data, that interoperable data there, to change the experience in my game. So now my game can be augmented based on your actions throughout the internet, the Web3 space. And when I think about interoperability, it's sometimes maybe not just a case of how I take my stuff and put it in other places. For me as a game, as a place that's, because the video game since the 90s has always tried to be the center of the home, right? You sit down in the home, you play the video game, and now your computer, it's like your phone, your iPhone, it's the center of your experience. And games, for a lot of people, especially younger generations, Gen Z, so on and so forth, even myself, games have always been that social space online. It's the chat room in a three-dimensional environment, and soon it will be the three-dimensional metaverse. So for me, it's very important for games now to acknowledge that we can bring in all of this information from outside, from various Web3 apps, and make experiences inside our games with them.
Because if that is a dream, and if that is something that is achievable, then we'll likely see traditional gaming studios, the big names that we know now, like Ubisoft, like Square Enix, they'll all be developing Web3 games with NFTs and support on the blockchain. And Tyler, I wonder what you think about that kind of incoming force that's going to hit Web3 eventually. How will the likes of Axie Infinity or World Wide Web compete with those big gaming giants once they eventually get there?
Oh, I don't know if that's for me to answer, but I'll but I will say for Thomas's game, I just love the interoperability of it, and so someone who just recently learned about it, it's very cool, and I think you're tackling it very well. Maybe I'll just talk about interoperability first instead. A little bit.
Sure, if you want to.
Okay. Well, so interoperability for us is I see it as a different way. We have a lot of partners. We've been in the space since 2018. Sandbox and Zedrun early on, and Artifact, and anyone who's touched our brand Atari, which I kind of look at it as like their Nirvana T-shirts of gaming. Everyone kind of knows of it, but maybe not know why, unless you've played some of the games growing up. And it resonates with a lot of people because it is that history of gaming and Pong and the original. So we have a lot of different partners, and it's easy to understand. So what we're actually building right now is the Atari Club. So if you've ever interacted with us on a Web3 space or in even just any Web2 hardware, we're finding a way to connect everyone, bring them into the ecosystem, and then show them other cool experiences like these guys up here. So we'll be able to work all around the blockchain to drive in and then drive out and reward if you want. If not, then you don't even have to interact with it. So that's what I see interoperability being for us as kind of a main connecting point between different metaverses or different experiences or games. So that's pretty interesting. As far as the big guys, There's some stuff that will happen. They'll make some moves, including start digital ownership. Bring it back to that is very important. And I think as we do these small wins, it's going to show that you're going to want to own your assets, and then the larger studios are going to have to start making games where you own your assets.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.